So today's daf is daf kafeh. We're just going to start with the last two lines of daf kaf dalid amud bet, so that it can be complete. Even though the recording from that I made for Shabbat, the daf of Shabbat, included these two lines. So it says as follows: Amar Rav Huna says, "Hayta talito chaguralo al motnav." If the person has their talit wrapped around their loins, meaning the lower part of their body, mutar likrot kriyat shema, it is permitted to read the Shema. In other words, one need not be fully clothed to recite the Shema. Tarya nami achi, we also learned in a Baraita. A Baraita is a text that it dates from the same time as the Mishnah and is comparable in its authority to the Mishnah, but was not included in the Mishnah itself. It says in the Baraita, "Hayta talito shel beged v'shel or v'shel sak." If a person had a talit, which here refers to a garment, they didn't mean a ritual talit like we wear. Okay, a garment of whether it's of cloth, it's of skin, it's of sack. Chagura al mutnav, and it is wrapped around his loins. Mutar likrot kriyat shema. He can read the Shema, which would basically mean if you're wearing shorts, even if you don't have a shirt, that's good enough. Aval tefillah. We turn to Kafeh Amud Aleph. Aval tefillah ad shechased libo. But when it comes to prayer, you have to have your heart covered, which means that a person has to be properly dressed for prayer. When you're praying, you're speaking to Hashem. When you're reading the Shema, it's like learning Torah. You're studying, you're reading the Shema. You can do that in your pajamas. You can do that with just shorts on. But if you are standing in the Amidah, you have to be dressed like you're before a king. You cannot dress without a shirt. V'amar Rav Huna says, Shachach ve'nichnas batfilin lebet hakisei. Now we're back to the bathroom, okay? That was a short respite. The person walks into the bathroom, he forgets that he's wearing tefillin, and he walks into the bathroom. So what should he do? He goes, and what it means when it says goes to the bathroom, it means he actually started going to the bathroom wearing the tefillin. He didn't realize he was wearing it. So, maniach yado alehen ad sheyigmor. It says he should cover them with his hand until he finishes. In other words, he already started going to the bathroom. What's he going to do? The head tefillin, probably, yeah. The arm one was usually covered anyway, but yeah.
You can't cover two hands.
Yeah, what are you going to do with two hands? Exactly, what are you going to do? They had smaller tefillin back then, yeah. Not the straps, obviously. You would only be able to cover the house of the tefillin. And the arm tefillin was usually covered anyway by a sleeve or by the clothing of the person. So, really, most likely the head tefillin is being spoken about here. Ad sheyigmor, sal kadatach. The Gemara says, Ad sheyigmor, what do you mean? The person walks in wearing tefillin, he's going to the bathroom, we're going to let him finish as long as he is in there. Some people go in with a newspaper, he could be in there for an hour. I mean, what does he, what do you mean until he's finished? Okay, so he says, Ela keda amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak ad sheyigmor amud rishon. In other words, when a person goes to the bathroom, and again, we're going into bodily functions in detail here, it happens in different cycles. In other words, not everything necessarily comes out at once. So the first stage of going to the bathroom, okay, the first amount that comes out, he should finish, and then he can go out, take off the tefillin, and finish what he has to do in the bathroom, go back into the bathroom. But he should not hold back what he started. If he actually started going to the bathroom, he should finish that part of going to the bathroom, and then go out, and if he has more to do, go back into the bathroom. Okay? So it says, V'lifsok la'altar. Why are you even allowing this person to finish what he started? Tell him, hold it in for one more minute, run out, take off the tefillin, and then come to the bathroom. Why are you letting him finish? Answer is because it's because v'lifsok la'altar v'likom. So why doesn't he just stop immediately and get up? Mishum de Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, because of what Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said. Titania, as it says in the Baraita, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Amud HaChozer mevi et ha'adam lidei hadrokan, Silon HaChozer mevi et ha'adam lidei yerakon. That he said that there are basically serious health problems that you can develop if you start going to the bathroom and you don't finish. So something called hadrokan can occur to a person, which I guess is some kind of a disease in the stomach, some kind of bowel-related disease will happen. And yerakon actually usually means jaundice, that if a person holds in urine, they will have jaundice. I'm not sure that we have medical evidence of that today, but whatever it is, certainly it's not healthy. We know that a person who needs to go to the bathroom should go right away. That's definitely true. So however we diagnose it, I don't know specifically. But the point is that what they're saying is once you started going to the bathroom, finish the amount that you need to go right now. There may be more coming, so you'll have time to run out, take off the tefillin, and complete the process afterwards. Itmar, it was stated, So'a al bisaro o yado munachat bebet hakisei. What happens if a person has excrement on their body? Okay, now we're assuming that this excrement is covered by a sleeve or by clothing. It's not exposed, but it's on their body. Or yadom munachat bebet hakisei means his hand is in the bathroom, but the rest of him is outside. Remember, in those days, all the bathroom was they had a wall, and behind the wall was where people would go to the bathroom. They didn't have like a separate bathroom like we have today. So if a person's hand was over the wall, or there's another girsah here, there's another textual variant that says instead of yadom munachat bebet hakisei, instead of his hand is in the bathroom, because after all, why would this person have their hand hanging over the bathroom if he's not using the bathroom? What it says in the other variant is his hands are dirty from using the bathroom, which means there's nothing actually, if you look at his hands, that you can see there's any matter or substance on his hands, but he went to the bathroom and he didn't wash his hands. Okay? So in either of these cases, the question is, can he read the Shema in this state? So Rav Huna Amar Mutar Likrot Kriyat Shema. Rav Huna said you can read the Shema even though you have these dirty hands or you have this fecal matter or whatever it is on your body. Rav Chisda Amar Asur Likrot Kriyat Shema. Rav Chisda says you cannot read the Shema in this state. What is the basis for the argument? Amar Rava said, "My tamad Rav Huna." Why did Rav Huna allow you to read the Shema in this case? Dichtiv, because it says, "Kol nishama tehalilya." It says that my entire soul will praise Hashem, which means it doesn't matter what's on your arm, it doesn't matter what's on your hand. It's your soul that's praising Hashem. Okay, that means your heart, your head, your mind, the upper portion of your body. What's on your arm, it doesn't matter. That's what Rav Huna said. But my tamad Rav Chisda, why was Rav Chisda more stringent? Dichtiv, because it says in the pasuk, Kal atzmotai tomarna Hashem yichamocha, which we read in the Nishmat Kol Chai every week. It says, all of my bones will say Hashem, who is like you. Meaning every part of your body is included. So you might think, hey, my hand is hanging over the bathroom, and my hand is in the bathroom, but the rest of me is outside. Why should that matter? As long as the part of me that's saying the Shema is outside, my mouth, my head is outside, what does it matter if my hand is inside the bathroom? Okay, so the answer is, it says kalatz motai. That means my entire body is included when I'm praising Hashem. So even if my hand is in a dirty place, the rest of me cannot be involved in saying prayers. So this is an argument between Rav Huna and Rav Chisda. Rav Huna was actually the teacher of Rav Chisda. There's an argument among the later commentaries whom the halakha follows in this case. As you can see, there's a little letter next to the statement of Rav Huna that goes to the side that says that this is what's brought in the Rambam and what's brought in the Shulchan Aruch. And the lenient position is actually the one that is accepted as the halakha. Itmar, it was stated, Reach Rashi yesh lo ikar. If you have a bad smell that has an ikar, it has a source. In other words, there's actually some kind of excrement there that's producing the smell. Rav Huna Amar, Rav Huna says, if you want to use the example we were using on Friday, we would say there's a dirty diaper in the room and it's making a smell. Okay? So in that case, Marchik Daled Amot V'Koreh Kriyat Shema. A person has to distance himself. Rav Huna says a person has to distance himself from this excrement and read the Shema 4 amot away. 4 amot is approximately 6 feet away from the substance. Rav Chisda Amar, Rav Chisda is more stringent. He says, Marchik Daled Amot Mimakom Shepasak Hareach V'Koreh Kriyat Shema. He has to be 4 amot away from where the smell stops. So everybody agrees he can't be in a smelly place when he reads the Shema. The only question is, does he have to be 4 amot away from the substance, even though he's only, let's say, a foot away from where the smell would stop? Let's say, for instance, the smell extends 3 amot away from the substance, okay? And he is 4 amot away from the substance. So he's a good amah away from the smell. He doesn't smell anything. He's 4 amot away from the substance. Alright, but he's only 1 amah away from where the smell stops. Okay, so according to Rav Huna, that's good enough. He's 4 amot away from the substance. According to Rav Chisda, no, he has to be 4 amot away from where the smell stops, which means he would have to be a full 7 amot away. Why? What's the argument here? The argument is, what is the obligation? To distance yourself from the substance or to distance yourself from the smell? Okay, is it 4 amot away from the substance or 4 amot away from the smell? So Tanya Kivatet Rav Chisda. There is in fact a baraita that supports Rav Chisda. Lo yikra adam kriyat shema lo keneged tzoat adam that a person should not read the Shema in front of the excrement of a person, v'lo keneged tzoat klavim, not in front of the excrement of a dog, v'lo keneged tzoat chazirim, and not in front of the excrement of a pig, v'lo keneged tzoat tarnegolim, and not in front of the excrement of tarnegolim, which are roosters. Okay, v'lo keneged tzoat ashpash v'chara, and similarly in front of a dump where people used to go to the bathroom sometimes, you cannot read in front of that either. V'mayam makom gavoa 10 tefachim or namuch 10 tefachim, yoshev b'tzido v'koreh kriyat shema. Okay, now, if, for example, you had a situation where whatever this stuff is elevated, okay, it's 10 tfachim, it's 10 handbreadths, which is approximately 3 feet above you on a ledge, or it's 3 feet below you on a ledge, okay, and you're above it, as long as you can't smell it, it's okay because you're considered to be in a totally different domain if it's either 10 tfachim lower than you or 10 tfachim higher than you. However, v'im lav, but if it's not 10 tefachim higher or lower, then marchik melo enav. He has to be away so he doesn't see it. So it has to either be behind him or he has to be so far away from it that he can no longer see it. V'chen latfilah, the same rule applies with prayer, that he has to be 4 amot away, or if it's in front of him, he has to be far enough away that he can't see it. Reach rashi yesh lo ikar, if you have a bad smell that has a source, like we said before, marchik daled amot mimakom hareach v'koreh. It says you have to be 4 amot away from the smell, v'koreh kriyat shema, and then you can read the Shema, meaning that the smell is considered like a substance. So you actually have to be 4 amot away from the smell. So in our case, you have to be 7 amot away from the substance itself, because you have to be a full 4 amot away from the substance. That supports Rav Chisda's view, which is the more stringent view. Amar Rava said, Letil chita ki hamatnita. He said the halacha doesn't follow this braita that we just read, because ela kiha ditanya. Rather, the halacha follows the following braita. Lo yikra adam kriyat shema lo keneged tzoat adam. We agree, you can't read the Shema if there is human excrement in front of you. V'lo keneged tzoat chazirim, and certainly not in front of when you're looking at the excrement of a pig. V'lo keneged tzoat klavim bizman shenatan orot letochan. And you cannot have dog dew in front of you when they put orot in it. What does that mean that they put orot in it? In the old days, the way that they tanned hides, if they wanted to make parchment with the skin of an animal, I taught this to the children's class before. If they wanted to take animal skin and make it into a parchment to write Sifrei Torah, the way that they tanned it was they put it into dog excrement. That was one of the things that they used to treat it, and it would harden the parchment. But more than that, it would make the most horrific smell. It was a terrible, terrible smell. So dog excrement by itself, according to the second Baraita, is not a problem. But dog excrement into which they have put these hides of the animals, that the smell is overwhelming, because you have both the decaying of the skin of the animal plus the excrement of the dog combined together, creating just something that's too intense. So you went to a tannery? Yeah.
That's without the excrement. Yeah, it's they have the disintegrated.
Right.
It's worse.
Even without it, it's a terrible smell. Yeah. It's a horrible smell. So kal v'chomer, we can imagine, what the smell was like when they used something even worse to do the processing. So ba'u minei me Rav Sheshet, they asked a question from Rav Sheshet as follows: Reach ra she'en lo ikar mahu. What about a reach ra? What about a bad smell? So incidentally, in those two baraitot, the difference between the two was that in the first one it said any dog excrement wasn't good, and the second one it was more lenient. It said dog excrement by itself would be okay, but dog excrement combined with hides would not be okay. So now they asked Rav Sheshet a question. They said, what about reach ra she'en lo ikar, a bad smell that doesn't have a substance? In other words, gas, basically, if people have gas. So what's the halacha there? Amar lahu, he said to them, atu chazu, come and look, hanet tzifei devei Rav. They had mats on the floor of the yeshiva. Just like if you go to preschool, they have mats on the floor where people take a nap. Well, people would spend so much time in the Beit Midrash that a lot of times they would want to take a nap on the floor. Okay? Tahane ganu v'hane garsei. That you would have some people sleeping on the floor in the middle of the Beit Midrash, and some people learning Torah at the same time. So obviously, even though when people are asleep, sometimes they have gas and it creates a smell, that wasn't considered a problem for the people who are studying. But that's only with regard to Divrei Torah, but not to say the Kriyat Shema. If there's a bad smell, even if it doesn't have a substance, you can't say the Kriyat Shema. But learning Torah, you can. And similar, and furthermore, even when it comes to learning Torah, if it's your gas that's happening, you have to wait for it to go. It's only somebody else that it doesn't interrupt your learning. Okay, so these are complicated halachot here. When you're in a yeshiva with a bunch of guys thankfully you're not responsible for what anybody else had for dinner the night before. They don't have to worry about whether they're creating a smell if you're learning Torah, but for yourself, you have to be concerned. You have to wait for it to pass. Itmar says, Tzoa overet. Tzoa overet means if there is some excrement passing by. It's floating by, it's being taken out. Let's say the garbage is passing by, somebody's carrying it out past you when you're trying to say the Shema. Abaye said, Mutar l'kor kriyat Shema. You can say the Shema even because it's passing by. It's not staying near you. So even though it might be close to you for a moment, it's not going to interrupt your Shema. Rava says, Asur l'kor kriyat Shema. You cannot say the Shema with this passing by. Amar Abaye said, Mena amina. Where did I get my position that you don't have to worry? If the excrement is in transit, it's moving, you don't have to worry. Where did I get this rule from? It's not because we learned in the Mishnah. If a tameh person is standing under a tree, in other words, there's a branch of a tree over him, okay, vatahor over, and the pure person walks by, let's say we're talking about a mitzorah. So he's creating, let's say, a tum'ah because he's supposed to be by himself. Badad yeshev, he's supposed to sit only by himself. And now he's under the same roof and somebody passes under the tree branch that is over him. So they're under the same roof for a moment because the mitzorah is standing there and the passerby goes under the same roof for a moment. Actually, tameh, he becomes tameh because the tameh guy is standing there. However, if the tahor person, the pure person, is standing under the tree, and the tameh person just passes by, tahor, he doesn't affect the tahor person because he's just passing by. Okay, vim amad tameh. However, if the impure person stands there, then he will make the person tameh. It's just if he's passing by that he won't affect him. And the same thing is true about a stone from a house that had tzara'at. Because remember, a house can have tzara'at. We learned in Parshat Mitzorah, a house can have tzara'at. So the stone is tameh. So being under the same roof with that stone can also make you tameh. But if it just passes under the tree, and somebody who is pure is standing under the tree, it's not going to affect them. If it stays under the tree, now it's going to affect them. So what's the reason there? The reason is because, well, we're going to see in a second. I don't want to spoil the end. V'Rava amar lach. Rava says as follows: Hatam bekviutat al yamilta. Over there, it has to do with kiviut. It has to do with what's established. In other words, the mitzorah establishes a makom. The impure person creates a place. Okay, creates a location that's tameh by standing there. So if he's just passing through, we can't say that he established a location. He didn't establish a location that is going to transmit his tum'ah. He just walked through for 1 second. Okay, or the even, the stone that has tzara'at. It has to establish a location under a roof. And now if you pass through that location, you can become tameh. But if the stone is just passing through, we can't say that it affects the location. It established a location. Okay. However, here we're not concerned about that. So dichtiv badad yeshev michutz lamachane moshavo, because when it comes to the mitzorah, it says he sits alone michutz lamachane moshavo. His outside of the camp is his place. Okay. In other words, he has a place. He has a defined place. If he makes his defined place underneath the tree, then anyone who passes under that tree is going to become tameh as well. Hacha. But here, v'hayam machanecha kadosh amar rachmana v'haleka. Here, what is the injunction? What is the rule? The rule is v'hayam machanecha kadosh. Your area has to be kadosh. It has to be pure. It has to be a holy place when you say the Shema. And you don't have that, even if the source of impurity, in this case, a source of dirtiness, let's say, the source of the bad smell, is just passing through. you can't say that your area is clean at that moment. So there's a difference between where what happens is that the object, the problematic person or the problematic entity is the thing that's creating a makom, it's creating a place. So there, it has to be kavua, it has to be stable to create a place. But if the thing is that your place has to be clean, it doesn't matter. Even if it passes through just for 1 second, it's going to take away from the cleanliness of your place. So that's really the machloket between Abaye and Rava here. Abaye is saying that it's the same concept. Just like Tum'ah, the Mitzorah, creates a place, creates a location that is problematic. And if you enter that location, it's a problem. But if he's just passing through, he doesn't create a location. So too, when it comes to Kriyat Shema, and it comes to prayer, the excrement creates a bad location, so to speak, a dirty location. And that's why you can't pray there. But if it's just passing through, we wouldn't say that it created a location. Rava is saying there's a difference here. True, the Mitzorah creates a location. But when it comes to the matters of the Shema and Tefillah, it's an issue of not of the excrement creating a location or establishing a place. It's a matter of you establishing a place that's clean. And even if the excrement passes through for a moment, it's going to impinge upon the purity and cleanliness of your area. It's more of a positive concept, according to Rava, and therefore even Tzo'ah passing through, even excrement passing through, is going to be a problem. Amar Rav Papa said, Pi chazir ketzoa overet tameh. If a pig walks by, it's like tzoa overet. It's like excrement passing by. Pshita, isn't this obvious? I mean, a pig is dirty. Lo tzricha afal gav desalik minara. It means even if the pig is coming up from its bath in the river, it's still considered dirty. A pig can never be clean. Amar Rabbi Yehuda said, Sefek tzoa asura, sefek meraglayim mutarim. That if you're in doubt as to whether there is excrement in the room, in the place where you're praying, you're not sure, so you have to be stringent. If there's a doubt as to whether there's urine in the room, you can be lenient. Ikad Amrei, some say, Amar Rav Yehuda, that what Rav Yehuda said was, Sefek tzo'ah b'bayit muteret, be'ashpa asura. Sefek meraglayim afilu be'ashpa nami mutarin. That he said something further. He said, if you have a doubt about the presence of excrement, be'ashpa, and you are in a place where excrement is normally found, there you have to assume the worst. If you're in doubt in the house, where it's not usually found, so then you can assume a lenient position. However, when it comes to urine, since urine is not as stringent to begin with, the laws related to that are not as stringent, so therefore, even be'ashpa, even if you're at a place where people from time to time use it as a temporary bathroom, like in a garbage dump, you don't have to assume it's there. So if you've checked for excrement and there's no excrement, you don't have to be concerned that maybe there's urine in that area, because we don't treat urine as stringently. Okay, Savarla kiha de Rav Hamnuna. He agrees with what Rav Hamnuna said. The Amar Rav Hamnuna lo asra Torah ele keneged amud bilvad. That Rav Hamnuna said the Torah only prohibited actual urine when it's coming out. In other words, if somebody is going to the bath, is urinating at that moment, they can't say the Shema. But urine on the floor is not considered to be as stringent of a problem, as serious of a problem as excrement would be. Ukid Rabbi Yonatan. The Rabbi Yonatan Rami. And this is like what Rabbi Yonatan said, because Rabbi Yonatan pointed out a contradiction in two verses. Because Ketiv, it says, because first it says, when you go out to war, you need to have a place where people go to the bathroom, a latrine, a place that people are going to go to the bathroom. And another verse says that you need to have a shovel on your belt so that you can cover your excrement. So it says, at first it sounds like you just go out and you do your business and you come back. You don't have to cover. The second time it says, no, you have to cover. So which one is correct? So he says, HaKetzad, kan bigdolim, kan biktanim. With excrement, with feces, you have to cover it. With urine, once it's on the ground, from a biblical standpoint, we don't consider that a problem. It doesn't take away from the Kiddushah of the place. So Alma, ktanim lo asrat Torah el keneged amud bilvad. Thus we see that the Torah only prohibited urine, meaning praying or saying Shema or doing holy things, when urine is present, when it's actually coming out, meaning when the person's actually going to the bathroom. But once it falls to the ground, it's permitted biblically. And it was the rabbis who came along and decreed that since it's treated similarly, people don't like either urine or feces to be around in a clean place. So therefore, the rabbis prohibited it. V'chi gazru bo rabbanan bevada'an, abal bisfekan lo gazor. And when the rabbis made their decree, they only decreed against the situation where you know that there's urine present. But if you're not sure, you don't have to assume the worst. And how much is considered urine? In other words, we know that people sometimes urinate on the grass, and the ground, even today. They once had a news expose. I don't know if anybody saw this, where they put cameras at a park, and they showed how many dogs came and urinated in different areas, and then like an hour later somebody came and sat down there, or they put their picnic there or something like that. People don't realize it happens all the time. And so how much is considered to be a presence of urine? So it says, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Kol Zman Shematpichin. As long as they are moist enough that if something touches it, it will be wet. V'chein Amar Rabba Bar Chana, Amar Yochanan, Kol Zman Shematpichin. As long as if somebody touched it, their hand would be wet. V'chein Amar Ula, Kol Zman Shematpichin. And so too did Ula say, as long as it's still moist enough that it would make something wet. Geniva Mishmei de Rav Amar. Geniva said a more stringent position. He said, Kol Zman Sherishuman Nikar. As long as you can see evidence of it. In other words, even if the ground looks dark from it, even if it's not wet anymore, that if you would touch it, it wouldn't make your hand wet. But you can see the impression left by it, you still can't read the Shema there. Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef said, Sharale Mare Gniva. He said, may God forgive Gniva for his wrong opinion. Hashtat So'a Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Kevan Shekarmu Panei Mutar Me Raglaim Mibaya. If Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav that even feces, even excrement, once it forms a crust on the top, in other words, once it's dried out, it's old, it's not a problem anymore. Certainly urine, which is already more lenient in halacha, just because you can see that there's a little darkness left in the ground from its presence, that shouldn't be significant. In other words, even with excrement, once it's dried out and it's formed a crust on top, we don't look at it as a problem for saying the Shema nearby. Certainly, urine that's absorbed into the ground, just because it still leaves a mark there, we shouldn't be concerned about it. Mibaya, So should we even have a question about urine? Amar le Abaye said, "Mai chazit samchataha." Why are you going with that position, that lenient position that says that excrement, that feces, that's old, that has a crust on top, is not considered feces anymore? Semochaha. You should go by this view. Ta'amar Rabba bar Rav Huna. Because Rabba, the son of Rav Huna, Amar Rav said in the name of Rav. So this is a contradictory view. Okay? This is a different view, because Rav Yehuda reported in the name of Rav one thing, but Rabbah said in the name of Rav Huna a different thing. So, afilu kacheres asura, that even if feces is as dried out as earthenware, it's still considered feces and you can't read the Shema next to it. And that would fit with what Geniva said in the name of Rav, because Geniva said in the name of Rav that even if you can see the imprint of urine, it's a problem. So too, even if it's dried out feces, it's still a problem. Okay, and how do we define so'ah? How do we define excrement that's like earthenware? Amar Rabba bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba bar Chana said that Rabbi Yochanan said, "Kozman shezorkav in a nifrechet." If you throw it and it doesn't break, it's still too moist. Okay. Some say kozman shegolalav in a nifrechet. Some say if you roll it and it doesn't break, okay, then it's still too moist. So then there's somewhat of a discussion in the Mefarshim which one of these is considered a more stringent view. The Rambam brings, if you throw it and it doesn't break, then it's still considered moist. If you throw it and it breaks, that's considered as dry as earthenware, and then it's not considered feces anymore. Amar Ravina said, Havaka imna kamed Rav Yehuda. Once upon a time, I was standing in front of Rav Yehuda, midifti from difti, chazat so'ah, and he saw some excrement. Amar li ayen I karmu pana ilo. And he told me, see if it's formed a crust on top or not. That's the lenient view, that even if it's still moist on the bottom, if it's formed a crust, we don't look at it as feces anymore. Ika da amrei, some reported, hachi, amarle, that he said something different. Ayen I miflae afluye, that he asked, are there holes in it? In other words, is it so dry that you can see cracks in it? Not just a crust, but actually cracks in it, that it's very, very dry and that would be even more dry than having a crust on top. What is the final decision here? We see that there's a lot of different standards for what's considered excrement that's dry enough to not be a concern anymore. So itmar, it was stated, so'akacheres, if you have feces that says dry as earthenware, Amemar Amar Asura, Amemar says it's still forbidden to read the Shema next to it, Umar Zucha Amar Muteret, and Mar Zucha said it's permitted. Amar Rava said Hilchita, here's the bottom line, So'a Kacheres Asura, that even if the Tso'a, even if the excrement is as dry as earthenware, you can't read the Shema next to it. Umei Raglayim, Kozman Shemat Pichin. And when it comes to urine, as long as it's moist enough that if it were to be touched, it would make whatever touched it wet, that's considered a problem. But just because you can see its outline in the sand, that's not a problem. It has to still be moist. So the Rambam though brings that there is a level of dryness of feces that would be considered beyond the pale, which is even more dry than earthenware, which is so dry that if you threw it, it would break into pieces. That's considered even more dry than earthenware. They raised an objection. It says that urine, as long as it's still moist enough that if something touches it, it makes it wet, you can't read the Shema next to it. Nivle'o, if it's swallowed up, if it's absorbed into the ground, or yavishu, or it dried up, let's say it's not in the ground where it would be swallowed up, but it's on top of rocks and it simply dried, mutarim, it's no problem. So my love, nivle'u dumyad yavishu. So aren't we talking here about comparable cases? You gave two cases where it's permitted. One case is where it's absorbed. One case is where it dries out. So shouldn't we assume that the cases are similar? That if the urine was on rocks and it dried out, so there's no evidence of it anymore. It's totally dry. So so too, when it comes to the urine that's on the sand or whatever, it also has to be where it leaves no trace. Harishuman nikar asur. Apal gav de'en matrichin. So that would seem to go with Gniva's position, that the stringent position, that even though it's dry, if it still has a trace there that you can see, it should be a problem. Yes?
So far, none of the rabbis discussing this are making a differentiation between feces and urine with regards to dryness.
They are.
But then I don't understand the argument that, I forgot which rabbi brought it, that you bring it, well, we see because if the feces are dry, then it's still forbidden. So with urine, then it's forbidden. That makes no differentiation between feces and urine.
It's more stringent about feces because it's saying that urine, if it's dry, it's not an issue anymore.
Yeah, but we're discussing the leniency, not the. In other words, we're discussing the fact that it should be
more lenient. The urine should be more lenient, right? Because even if it's just dry, it's good enough. Even though it has a presence, still there's still a physical presence. Whereas they're saying that when it comes to the feces, even if it's dried out, it's going to be a problem unless it's so dry that it's literally falling apart. Okay, so there's a level of dryness that's even further. Whereas the urine could just be dry, that if you touch it, it's not moist anymore.
That takes the assumption that we're taking feces and urine at the same level.
To a certain extent, yeah. To a certain extent, yeah. I mean, they both have a dryness factor and a certain level of dryness. So what he's saying here is, though, that maybe we should go back to Gniva's view and say that even if there's still an imprint of it when it comes to urine, we should still consider it a problem. So he says, "Uletamech emaresha," but no. The beginning of that braita said, "Kol zman shematpichinu dasur harishuman nikar sharei." The beginning said, as long as it's still moist. Once it's dry, it's not a problem anymore, even though you can see the imprint there. So, ela meha leka lemishma mina. Rather, we cannot derive anything from that braita, because if you take the beginning of the braita literally, the only issue is the moistness of it. Once it's dry, it's fine. If you take the end of the braita literally, dryness is not enough. If it still leaves an impression, if it still has a presence that you can see, it would be a problem. So we can't definitively decide between the different positions based on this alone. Lema katanaim, maybe we can argue that it's actually a machloket of Tanaim. It's actually an argument between earlier rabbis, because it says, Kelish nishpechu mimenu meraglaim, that if you had a vessel like a chamber pot that you spilled out urine from it, asur likrot kriyat shema kinegdo, that you can't read the Shema in front of that because it just had urine in it. So even though you poured it out, it's still not clean. However, umei raglaim atzman shenishpechu, and urine itself that's poured out, nivle'u mutar, lo nivle'u asur. If it's swallowed up in the ground, in other words, if it's absorbed, that's fine. If it's not absorbed, if it's still on the surface of the ground, it's no good. Rabbi Yossi omer, kozman shematpichin. Rabbi Yossi says, even if it is absorbed, if the ground is still wet, that if you touch it, it's going to make your hand wet, it's no good. So the Gemara says, "My nivle'u." What was the first case? The Tanna Kama said there's a difference between whether it's absorbed in the ground or not absorbed in the ground, right? So what was he talking about? Umay lo nivle'u. The Kamar Tanna Kama. Ilema nivle'u de'in matpichin lo nivle'u de matpichin. So if you're going to tell me that, what did the Tanna Kama mean? He was distinguishing between absorbed and not absorbed. So what are you going to tell me? Absorbed means it's dry now because it absorbed in the ground, right? Not absorbed means it's still wet. If that's the case, so then you're going to tell me that Rav Yossi comes along and says that as long as it's moist, it's a problem. Okay? So if that's the case, that the problem is he's saying the same thing as the Tanna Kama. Because the Tanna Kama said, if it's absorbed, it's good, and you're saying being absorbed is the same thing as it being dry. And Rabbi Yossi said, as long as it's dry, right? As long as it's dry, it's okay. Because the Tanna Kama said absorbed. You're saying absorbed just means that it's dry. Rabbi Yossi says, if it's wet, it's no good. That's the same thing as saying if it's dry, it is good. So you're saying the same thing. Rather, what must we say? Ela nivle'u de'en rishuman nikar, lo nivle'u de rishuman nikar, v'at Rabbi Yossi lememar, kozman shematpichinu dasur, har rishuman nikar shareh. Thus, we must interpret the Baraita as follows: that the Tanna Kama said absorbed. When the Tanna Kama said absorbed, he meant that it didn't leave any trace. Okay? And when he said it wasn't absorbed, it meant that it did leave a trace. So what the Tanna Kama is saying is that even if it's dry, if it leaves a trace, if you can still see it, it's a problem. And Rabbi Yossi is coming along and saying, no, only if it's wet is it a problem. Just the fact that you can see evidence of it is not a problem. So we see a machloket here. Lo, the kulei alma kozman shematpichinu dasur harishuman nikar shareh. No, we're not going to accept that. We're not going to accept that. We say that everybody agrees that wetness is the factor. As we turn to Amud Bet, nobody says that rishuman nikar, just the fact that you can see that it was there, is a problem. Nobody's going to go with Geniva's extreme view. But there's a further level of moistness, and this further level of moistness is mentioned in other halachic contexts as well. Which means, if you have something, there are two levels of wetness. There's moist, that if you touch it, it will make your hand wet. But it doesn't give your hand enough wetness to make something else wet. Okay, like if you have a cloth, like a paper towel that's wet, it can maybe make your fingers moist. But if you touch something else, you're not going to make it moist because there's not enough moisture. However, then you can have something that's really wet, that's soaked, and you touch that, now your hand is wet, you touch something else, it's also going to be wet. Right? So that's the machloket between them. That according to Rabbi Yossi, it has to be, according to the Tanna Kama, it has to be so wet that actually, if you touched it, your fingers would be wet enough to make something else wet. According to Rabbi Yossi, it just has to be wet enough. So according to the Tanna Kama, is actually more lenient, because he's saying if it's wet enough that it'll make your fingers wet, that's not a problem. It's only a problem if it'll make your fingers so wet that they'll make something else wet. Rabbi Yossi says if it's even wet enough to make your fingers wet, it's still considered the presence of urine and it's a problem. But everybody agrees if it's dry, that all you see is the trace of it, but you touch it and your fingers are totally dry, that's not going to be a problem at all. So now we say, back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah talked about a person who went into the mikveh, and he was in the mikveh, and all of a sudden he realized it's sunrise is in 3 minutes? I'm going to miss the Shema. I want to say the Shema right before sunrise, because that's the ideal time to say it. So it quotes from the Mishnah, Yarad Litbol im yachol la'alot kulei. That's from the Mishnah. Lema tana stama ki Rabbi Eliezer. This seems to support Rabbi Eliezer's view. Da'amar Rabbi Eliezer, because he said, Da'amar ada netzach hama. Because you'll remember, there's a Mishnah earlier in the Masekhet, if you were following the daf up till now, that mentions an opinion of Rabbi Eliezer that you can only read the Shema up to sunrise. We follow Rabbi Yehoshua's view, which is you can read it till a quarter of the day, till the 3rd hour. Okay, that gives us a little leeway. But according to Rabbi Eliezer, you only have till sunrise. You missed sunrise? Sorry, you missed it for the day. So this seems to support that, because this guy's in the mikveh. He sees that the sun is about to come up. He has to read the Shema right away, even though he's not clothed. So what does he do? He covers himself in the water. So no, afilu tema Rabbi Yoshua. You could still say that we follow Rabbi Yoshua, and there's no contradiction. Vedilma kevatikin, but this person who was in the mikveh wanted to do the stringent view of the vatikin, not because you can't read the Shema afterwards, but because the best time to read the Shema is at sunrise. So even though everyone agrees that you really have more time afterwards to read. Because Rabbi Yochanan had said, Vatikin, those who were very, very punctilious, very zealous about mitzvot, would finish the Shema right at the rising of the sun. And then they would say the Amidah right afterwards. But this person in the mikveh is not giving us a psak halacha. He's not telling us that you must read the Shema by Hanetzachama. He's saying that he wanted to. He wanted to do the stringent way. He wanted to do the best way. If he doesn't have time to get out of the mikveh, the Mishnah said he should cover himself in water and read. We have a problem here. His heart is going to see his erva. So even if we assume that the water is murky enough that he's not considered unclothed, it's not totally clear water, it's murky water, still his heart is going to see his lower half. And we learned before that there always has to be a separation between the upper half of the body and the lower half when you're going to say the Shema. So to speak, your heart can't see your private area.
Wait, where does it say murky water here?
You continue.
Yeah, I know. That's what it's going to say next. I hopped the conclusion.
Oh.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. Yeah. So it doesn't know that yet. Amar Rebbe Elazar. So Rabbi Elazar said, and some say it was Rav Acha bar Abba bar Acha, Mishum Rabbeinu, in the name of Rabbeinu, B'mayim akurin shanu, that it's talking about dirty water. We had mentioned that when we did the Mishnah. That's why I forgot it wasn't actually in the Mishnah. Right. So they didn't know that. That's why in the murky water is considered like a covering. It's considered like its clothes around him. So since his heart is above the water, and his private area is below the water, and it's in the murkiness, his heart doesn't see it. It's considered as if it's the earth itself, and his heart is not going to see his erva because the water is dirty. Okay, that's the answer. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, the Tanakh Kama said that even in clear water, you can stand and you can read the Shema. V'yesh omrim, some say ochran biraglo. He should make them dirty with his foot. He can kick up dirt from the bottom of the mikveh, because back then he's in water that the floor is dirt, the floor is clay or it's dirt. So he kicks it up and he dirties the water, makes it murky, so that his heart doesn't see his lower half. Doesn't the Tanakh Kama care? Doesn't the first Tanakh, who says you can just go into clear water, you can say the Shema without any interposition? How could that be? What about the fact that his heart there's no separation between his upper half and his lower half? So kasavar liboro eta irva mutar, that he maintains that your heart seeing, so to speak, your lower half is not a problem. The second opinion that says you have to make the water dirty says that you have to be concerned about that. Vare akevoro eta irva. What about the fact that his feet are going to see his erva? In other words, is it enough that your upper half doesn't see that there's a separation between the upper half and your lower half? Or is it that none of your body parts can have a clear, any body part has to have an interruption between itself and your private area? So the answer is, it's not a problem for any of your other limbs to be exposed to your private area. Only your upper half has to be separated from the lower half. Itmar, it was stated, it's no problem for your feet to see your private area. Nogea, however, if any limb of your body is touching your private area, Abaye amar asur, Rava amar mutar. Abaye says you can't read the Shema in that state. Rava says it's okay. Rav Zevid matnela lahashemata achi. Rav Zevid reported this in the following way. Rav Chinena bered Rav Ika matnela achi. So, I'm sorry, Rav Zevid reported it the previous way, the way that we just said. Rav Chinena bered Rav Ika, Rav Chinena, the son of Rav Ika, matnela hachi. He said it as follows: Nogea divrei kol asur, that everybody agrees that if one of your limbs is touching your private area, it's no good. Ro'eh Abaye amar asur, Rava amar mutar. In other words, according to Abaye, basically your private parts have to be covered. Because if any part of your body can see it, so to speak, it's going to be a problem. Which means it has to be totally covered. According to Rava, as long as your upper half, there's a separation between your upper half and your lower half, it's okay. Okay, lo nitna Torah le malachei asharet, because the Torah wasn't given to angels in heaven. In other words, it's too difficult to be sure that you're always going to be totally covered, that no part of your body is going to have a clear view of your private area. The halacha is, if you're touching your private area, you cannot read the Shema. But if your other body parts can see that area, it's okay. Amar Rava says, "Tzo'a ba'ashashit mutar lekrot kriyat shema kenegda, erva ba'ashashit asur lekrot kriyat shema kenegda." That the Rava says that if you have excrement in a clear vessel, in a glass vessel, you can read the Shema right next to it. Why? Because it's sealed in a glass vessel. So even though you can see it, you can't smell it. However, nakedness, if a person is behind, let's say, a clear glass window and they're unclothed, you can't read the Shema with them there. When it comes to excrement, all we need to do is cover it. As long as it's covered, it doesn't matter that it's covered by glass. So what that you can see it? Seeing it is not the problem necessarily. It's covered. However, if you have nakedness in a clear window, you cannot read the Shema facing it. Because it says he shouldn't see any nakedness, any manner of nakedness among you. There it has to do with re'iyah, with seeing, Amar Rahmana. As long as it's visible, it's a problem. So the fact that it's behind a glass doesn't make it any less visible. So when it comes to nakedness, we're concerned about visibility. When it comes to excrement, we're concerned about covering. As long as it's covered, it's considered covered, it's sealed off, it's okay. Amar Abaye said, if you have a tiny amount of excrement, you can mivatla barok, you can spit on it with, and cover it with your spit, and that's enough. Amar Rava said, Ubarok ava. Only if you have very thick spit, that's enough that it's going to cover it and not just absorb into it. Okay? Amar Rava said, let's say you're walking by and there's a tiny bit of excrement in a little hole next to you. Put your foot over the hole, as long as your foot is not touching the excrement, but now it's covered, and you can read the Shema. Ba'amar Breid Ravina, Mar, the son of Ravina, asked the following question. So, adivuka besandalo. Let's say you have, unfortunately, you're walking down the street and somebody didn't curb their dog. Oh no, we said that dog excrement is not a problem. Or whatever. You stepped in something you shouldn't have. It stuck to the bottom of your foot, stuck to the bottom of your shoe. Mai. So on one hand, when you're standing, right, it's covered. It's under the shoe. On the other hand, because it's dvuka, it's attached to the shoe, right? So it's really, you're touching it. You're considered touching it, so it's a problem. So what do we do? So he says, Teku, they couldn't resolve it. And so therefore the halakha is stringent in this case, that we say if it's stuck to your shoe, you cannot read the Shema like that. Even though when you stand up, obviously it's covered. But since it's touching you, it's no good. Amar Rav Yehuda said, Akum arom, asur likor kriyat Shema kenegdo. That even a non-Jew who's unclothed, you can't read the Shema in front of them. In other words, even though you might think that a non-Jew is not subject to the same rules of modesty as a Jew, but still, their nakedness is a concern. But certainly it's not just a non-Jew, even a Jew who's naked. But Yisrael pshita ledasor. We know that for a Jew to be naked in our presence is a problem. But But when it comes to a non-Jew, we needed to be told. Why? Because it says that the flesh of donkeys is their flesh. In other words, since we don't hold the non-Jews, and especially in those times, they didn't have a concept of modesty, they were very animalistic, we don't hold, they were described as chamorim, they were described as being like donkeys. So since we don't hold them up to the same standard of modesty, maybe their flesh is not considered anything, it's just considered like a donkey walking by. If a donkey is walking by, does he have to put on clothes because I'm saying the Shema? If a cat is walking, you have to put on clothes? No. So why should? So with a non-Jew, they're equally a concern, you might think. So the answer is no. When it comes to a human being, they have to be covered up. Okay? So you might have thought, that non-Jews are also subject to the rules of nakedness, because because what is the first case of looking at nakedness that we find in the entire Torah? It's the sons of Noach looking at him inappropriately, or one of the sons, Ham, looking at him inappropriately, and then saying to his two brothers to come, and they cover him. So you see that the idea of gazing upon somebody unclothed is even for non-Jews something significant. It said that although in the mikveh, and as we've explained now, murky water in the mikveh, a person can read the Shema there, but he can't read the Shema in the presence of bad water, which means smelly, putrid water, or mei mishra, that we said was the water that they used to soak flax in, which would become very smelly as well, ad shiyatil letochan mayim, until he puts clean water in. So the Gemara says, v'chama maya rami ve'azil, how much water are you going to pour in? If you have a huge vat filled with this flax that's soaking, how much water is going to nullify that? What are you going to put in? 10 gallons of water? I mean, that's impossible. Ela hachikama, rather there's a piece missing from the Mishnah here, really. There was a part omitted. Lo yitkaselo b'mayim hara'im, he can't cover himself in dirty water. Velo b'mei mishra, klal. And he can't go into the water that the flax is soaking in and read the Shema in there. Even if it's murky water, he can't because it's too smelly. Umei raglayim. And when it comes to urine, a separate issue, ad shiyatil letochan mayim. If he puts in clean water, he can nullify the issue of urine nearby. V'yikra, and then read. That doesn't mean he's going to go into the urine. It means that if he has urine nearby, so it's a different case. He can nullify it by putting clean water in. Tanu Rabbanan, as the rabbis taught, Kama yatil letochan mayim kol shehu. All you need to put in is a little bit of clean water, and it already, in a way, nullifies it. Rabbi Zakai Omer, Rabbi Zakai said revi'it. You need a revi'it to put a revi'it in, which is a more significant amount, about 3 fluid ounces of water in. Amar Rav Nachman said machloket lebasof. That's only saying if somebody, let's say, there's urine in a container. For some reason you are in a lab. You're in the lab where they do all the urine samples, and you need to say the Shema. Okay, so what do? Obviously, you're going to put water in it, right? If you do that, you'll get in a lot of trouble. All right, but so you have urine in a container. You need to nullify it. So it says livasof. Afterwards, according to the Tanakama, you can pour a little bit of water in, and as long as you dilute it a little bit, that's enough. According to Rabbi Zakai, you have to dilute it a lot. You need 3 ounces worth of water. But according to Rav Nachman, even if there was a little water beforehand, and the person urinated into it, or put the urine into it, it would be nullified automatically. Now that would mean that, let's say, for example, a toilet, right, that has water from before. Okay? Rav Yosef, Amar Machloket Lechatchila, he says, no, it's the opposite. When Rabbi Zakai and the Tanakama were arguing, they were arguing about how much you need to put in before. That the Tanakama said even if there's just a little water. And Rabbi Zakai said even if there's a lot of water. You have to have a lot of water. You have to have 3 ounces of water. But afterwards, once there's urine there, everybody agrees you need a significant amount of water. Pouring a little bit is not going to be enough. Amarle Rav Yosef l'shama'e, Rav Yosef said to his servant, Aitili revi'iyata demaya ke Rabbi Zakai, bring me a revi'it of water in accordance with the position of Rabbi Zakai, because there was some urine there, he needed to pour water into it in order to dilute it. So that would mean after the fact. So before the fact, they argue about how much needs to be in the vessel so that urine that enters the vessel doesn't create a problem. After the fact, once there's already urine there, everybody agrees you need to put a revi'it of water, which is about 3 ounces, in order to nullify it and make it okay to read the Shema nearby. We go on a little bit further. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Geraf shel re'i ve'avit shel meraglayim. If you have a chamber pot, or a pot that was used for urination, so these are not just random vessels, but actually vessels designated for toilet use, asur likrot kriyat shema kenegdan v'afal pi she'en behem klum. Even if the chamber pot is there, and right now there's nothing in the chamber pot, it's clean, because it's used for that, you can't read the Shema next to it. And as we said, urine itself, you have to put water to dilute it. And according to the Tanakama, just a little bit of water needs to be put in. Rabbi Zakai Omer Revi'it, as we said before, Rabbi Zakai says you need to put 3 ounces approximately of water in order to nullify the urine. So what we see here though is that the chamber pot, and incidentally in halakha it's brought that this is talking about earthenware chamber pots because they absorb. But if you had, let's say, glass chamber pot that doesn't absorb anything, and when it's clean, it's totally clean, or like a porcelain toilet, for example, that when you clean, it's totally clean, it might not be an issue. Okay, so Ben lifnei amita, ben lachar amita. Whether it's in front of the bed, meaning it's close to you, or it's behind the bed. Let's say the chamber pot's behind the bed, or the urine is behind the bed. That's further away from you, right? So even there, you should dilute it. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer lachar amita korei lifnei amita ino korei. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said, if it's behind the bed, it's already like in a different place. You can read the Shema even though it's there. But lifnei amita eno kore. But if it's in front of the bed, meaning it's closer to you, the bed is not interrupting between you and it, so then you can't read the Shema while it's there. Aval marchiku arba amot v'kore. He has to go 4 amot away and read 4 amot away from the urine that's there. Okay, Rashi is saying this is talking about under the bed versus outside the bed. In other words, if it's in front of the bed versus being under the bed. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar omer, afilu bayit mea ama, lo yikra ad shiyotziem o shiyenichem tachat hamita. According to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, if there's urine anywhere in the room, even if the room is 100 amot, you can't read the Shema until it's under the bed or you get it out of there. Okay, but you cannot just walk 6 feet away from it and recite the Shema. Ibayilhu, they asked a question, Hechi ka'amar, what did he mean before when he said you have to go away 4 amot? Achara mita kore miyad. Did he mean that if it's under the bed, he can read even if he's standing right next to the bed? But lifnei amita, if it's in front of the bed, marchik arba amot v'koreh, then he has to go away 6 feet. Or odilma hachi kamar, or maybe what he meant was lachar amita marchik ta'od amot v'koreh, lifnei amita eno koreh klal. Or maybe what he meant was behind the bed, he still has to go 6 feet away, and if it's in front of the bed, he can't read there at all, anywhere in the room. Tashma, come and listen to Tanya, because it says in the Braita, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said, Achara mita koreh miyad, lefnei amita marchik arba amot. That according to the first opinion, if it's already under the bed or behind the bed, he can read even right next to the bed, because it's considered covered. But if it's in front of the bed, that's when he has to go 6 feet away. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said, Afilu bayit mea ama, lo yikrat shiyotzema o shiyenichem tachat hamita. Okay, he said, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said, even a house, even a room, meaning of 100 amot, you can't read the Shema in there until you take out the urine or you cover it by putting it under the bed. Now, the Gemara says, wait a second here. Bayan ifshita, you answered our question. Bayan ifshita lan. You answered our question. What was our question? Our question was, is behind the bed good enough, even without moving away 4 amot? The answer is yes. As long as the urine is under the bed or it's behind the bed, that's enough. You don't have to move any further away. It's considered covered. Okay? But now we have a different problem. Matnaita kashyan adadeh. But we have a different problem. In the first case, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel was the one who was saying that you needed to move 6 feet away from the urine if it's in front of the bed. And you don't have to move away at all if it's under the bed. And it was Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar who was saying that even if the house or the room is 100 amot, you can't read anywhere in that room. You can't just walk away 6 feet. You have to either put it under the bed or get it out. And in the second Braita, it's the opposite. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is the one who's saying that anywhere in the room is no good, and Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is the one who's saying you just have to walk 6 feet away from it. So now we have a different problem. Who said what? So the Gemara answers, Epoch batraita. You should switch it around, the latter one, reverse it, so that it's Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel who's saying you can walk 6 feet away, and it's Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar who's saying nowhere in the room is good until that urine is under the bed. So how do you know that that's really the true text? How do you know it was really Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel that was more lenient and said you could walk only 6 feet away? Because who is the one who says that a whole room can be treated like only 4 amot? Okay, Karba Amot Dameh, Rabban Shimon ben Elazar. It's Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Very interesting here. In another context, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar in the Hilchot Shabbat, with regard to fencing in an area, he says that no matter how big the area is, it's all considered one area as long as it is between the same 4 walls. In other words, any area, no matter how large, that's walled around is considered one area. So he's
where we can walk to the kitchen or the bathroom.
Right. So because Rabban Shimon ben Elazar is the one who says that elsewhere, therefore here we assume that he's the one who says that anywhere in that room that has urine in it, even if you're 6 feet away, it's no good. Now Rashi says something very interesting here, which is, he says, when it says, who is the person who says one entire room is all considered like the same place, no matter how far you are from anything in the room, you're considered to be in the same room with it? It's Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, right? So Rashi says, Lo yadati hechanhi. I don't know where it says anywhere that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says that position. So Rashi didn't know. Rabbeinu Yonah and Tosafot bring us sources to give us a basis for it, but Rashi himself didn't know what the source was. And if you look on the side Gilyona Shas, that's Rabbi Akiva Eger, he has a long thing where he quotes all the places in Shas where Rashi says, I don't know. Where Rashi says, I don't know the answer. There are many places where Rashi says, listen, I don't know, I'm not sure what the source is. Rabbeinu Yonah explains what the source is, and some of the other Rishonim explain what the source is, but Rashi was never afraid to say, I don't know. And in fact, even in the Chumash, sometimes he'll say, I don't know. And it's very important that he says, I don't know, for two reasons. First of all, because if he didn't say, I don't know, you think you're missing something. Because you would be breaking your head saying, what do you mean Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is the one who says that a room is always considered like one place no matter what? Where does he say that on the page? And why doesn't the Gemara say where he says that? How am I supposed to know where he says that? And you're going to break your head trying to figure it out. So Rashi says, it's not here and I don't know. Okay, so that's the other reason. That's reason number one, so that you don't break your head thinking that you're missing something. But it's also important as a lesson in Musar. It's also ethically important that he tell you, I don't know, so that you realize there are some things even Rashi doesn't know. He doesn't try to fool you into thinking, I know, I don't even have to say it. It goes without saying. Why should I even bother saying it? And, he comes out and tells you he doesn't know. So you will realize that it's okay not to know certain things. It's an important thing to remember. That even Rashi admitted when he didn't know something. So we'll just conclude this piece. So, Amar Rav Yosef said, Ba'ai minei mirav Huna. I asked Rav Huna, Mita pachot mishlosha, pshita li techalavud dameh. He says, if the bed is lower than 3 tfachim off the ground, I know that whatever's under it is considered covered because we have a principle of lavud. Anything within 3 tfachim is considered closed. So it's like a closed thing. So therefore it's no problem. But, what about if it's 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 tfachim off the ground and the urine is underneath? Mahu, what's the halacha? Amar le lo yadana. He says, I don't know, I'm not sure. He says, Asara vadai lo mibaili. But definitely don't ask me 10 tfachim. Now what he meant to say was, 10 tfachim, it's definitely wide open. Because 10 tfachim off the ground is very high. And if the urine is under there, it's definitely not covered. Because 10 tfachim off the ground is 3 feet off the ground. How could you say that because it's under a bed that's 10 tfachim high, that it's covered? Amar Abaye said, Shapira vadetilo ibayelach. You're right not to ask about 10 tfachim, but not for the reason that you thought. For the opposite reason. Kol asara rishuta acharitihi. Because actually, if it's 10 tfachim high, it's even better. Why is it even better? Because 10 tfachim is considered that it creates its own area. Right? It's considered like it makes its own domain. So the urine is considered to be in a different room now. It's not covered, but it's like it's in a different room because there's a 10 tefach high bed over it, creating a new domain. It's like it has its own little house. Amar Rava said, Hilcheta, what's the halacha? Pachot mishlosha, less than 3, kalavud dameh. It's like sealed. Asara rishuta acharitihi. If it's 10 tefachim high, it's like it's in a different room. Mishlosha ad asara. From 3 to 10, Hainu deba'a minei Rav Yosef mirav Huna. That was the question. Anything from 3 through 9, we don't know. Velo pashatle. And that was what Rav Yosef asked Rav Huna, and we don't know the answer. Okay? Amar Rav said, Halacha k'Rabban Shimon ben Elazar. That k'Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. V'chen Amar Bali. And so did Bali say, Amar Rabbi Yaakov Barad bat Shmuel. In the name of Yaakov, who was the son of the daughter of Shmuel, halacha Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, that the halacha follows Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, which would mean anywhere in the room is no good if the urine is exposed. Even if you're 6 feet away, it's no good. V'Rava Amar Rava said, "Ein halacha Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar." The halacha does not follow Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, which means that if you're 6 feet away from the urine, even if it's in the same room that you are, it's okay actually. One last little vignette here. Rav Achai Yasak le Livrei Be Rav Yitzchak Bar Shemuel Bar Marta. That Rav Achai once married off his son in the house of Rav Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta. He went to the chuppah, meaning that he went on his wedding night, and he couldn't consummate the marriage. He didn't know why. For some reason, his son, he couldn't consummate the marriage. Azal batre le'iyuneh. He went into the room to find out what's going on, what's wrong here. Chazal sefer Torah de mancha. He saw that there was a sefer Torah in the room. That was why he couldn't do it. Amar lehu. He said to them, Echu hashta lo atai sakantun nevri. If I had not come in and checked this out, you would have put my son in danger. In other words, because he was having marital relations in a room that had a Sefer Torah there, and it shouldn't be there like that. The Tanya, as it says in the Braita, Bayit sheyesh bo Sefer Torah utfilin, in a room. Now, when they say house, they mean a room, because they didn't have multi-room houses. So a room that has a Sefer Torah, or tefillin, asur l'shamesh bo et hamita ad shiyotzim o sheyinichem keli b'toch keli. So a person who's in a room that has a Sefer Torah can't have marital relations unless the tefillin or the Sefer Torah is doubly covered. It's in one vessel that's inside another vessel. And Amar Abaye lo shanu ela bekli she'enan kilyan, aval bekli shu kilyan afilu asra maneh kechad man adameh. And Abaye points out that in this regard, it has to be not the covering that's designated. In other words, the tefillin is in the bag that belongs to the tefillin. That's not considered one covering. It has to be a covering that isn't the covering of the tefillin. Let's say you normally have like one of those Russian dolls, that has all the multiple dolls inside a doll. You have 3 tefillin bags. You put it in a little bag, you put the little bag in a big bag, you put the big bag in a third bag. That's considered just one bag. That's not considered 3 bags because they're all part of the first tefillin bag. Okay, they're all considered an extension of the tefillin itself. Okay, so it has to be something which is in addition to the tefillin itself. And one last point, he says, Amar Rava Gelima Akamatra. He says, if you have a bookshelf with a cloth over it, kachli b'toch kli dameh, it's like having a vessel within a vessel. In other words, even though you had a shelf, let's say, that had the Sefer Torah or has the Sifrei Kodesh on it, by covering that with a cloth, that's considered good enough as an interposition for marital relations to take place in the room. And we will conclude for today. Have a great day.